Good afternoon and Happy New Year. It's Joyful Christian Hermit. I've been so busy from waking this morning until now, really texting back and forth with this young friend who I've met years ago. She was the little girl that came into the parish to Mass in the evening. When I was first Catholic, I noticed her as in the winter. Dark, we had a big snowstorm. There was this little girl by herself at Mass, and I ended up taking her home, asking her, asking around some of the other parishioners after that evening Mass. Oh, that's so and so. I think that's so and so's daughter. Oh, she comes, and just like it was no big deal that this little girl was there by herself. And in the snowstorm, so her birthday was going to be the next day. In fact, Saint Francis de Sales is her birthday, January 24th. We became friends, and I would started picking her up and dropping her off. Found out about her family situation, and that she really basically took care of her maybe 4-year-old sister and 2-year-old brother, or barely two, after school, and the mother would work or be asleep from working a night job or something like that. And the father was then working, but there were different things going on in the home that, people have struggles. They were working through, the parents were, and the mother, and things, different lifestyle, and deeper conversions have happened since then. But this little girl was just so holy, a little girl, and loved Mass, and needed some tutoring. The principal of the Catholic school, approached me and realized that we'd become friends, that she was my friend, and so I tutored her and have her over to my house. And it was nice for my son to see that he wasn't the one and only, since his sisters were off to college, that still, that another young person would be around that I was doing things for, and sort of good for him. um, so we became friends, and off and on. And so I got a text from her yesterday asking prayers for, many of you have probably heard of this young priest, 33 years old. Dennis Christian Conway is his name. Father Dennis Christian Conway, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in the United States. And on Tuesday night, evidently, he took his own life. It must have been through medications or something that he ingested. They're doing an autopsy. There was a notice put out by the archbishop there in Iowa. And in it, he mentioned that around the time of his taking his life, slightly before that, it was noticed, evidently by someone or others, that he was in a severe mental health crisis, that it had become obvious. And but then that night or something, he took his life, and funeral arrangements are pending. They have to have an autopsy, since they don't know exactly, what it was or what part killed him, how he was affected. So it wasn't anything external obvious, something that he must have taken, but definitely a suicide. So my young friend had seen this notice online or in the newspaper or something, and it's out there with this photo, and wanted me to pray for him, was sending it out to friends to pray for the priest. And she made the comment, maybe I should find it here. It was telling, it just struck me. And it's, my goodness, we've written a lot. Me, mostly, I'm a writer. She is too, but I don't think anyone can top I'm so against the norms of what I write. I'm a writer, and I write and write and write. and texting. It's a no-no. We're supposed to be short and brief and all in this day and age. And I'm not. How can you express thoughts all that briefly? And especially me with my pain and my age and my memory and my mind is slower. So I have all these excuses for it. I've always been a writer, more lengthy. But okay, I found here, and I found there's his photo, the priest. I can't even get that. Father Dennis Conway. And I ended up taking time, and the statement from the Archbishop on it. And I think it's commendable that they are not hush-hushing, because this is a step, I think, in the right direction for our church, for the Catholic Church. Jesus didn't hide that, it wasn't hidden that Judas had betrayed him. Jesus did not hide that, or even hide that he knew in advance. And Jesus made comments about Judas taking his life then, and grieved that he had. So it's, so let me find what my friend wrote. I'd asked about it, if this is someone that she knew, and etc., or how, And she said, "No, I'm sharing sharing for prayers for him, and all the people suffering from his absence, and how it took place. I'm sure it has made many confused and hurt and angry. I pray at the very least God opened purgatory for this priest's suffering soul, for this priest's suffering soul." And of course, I had written immediately to her then that how loving it is of her to do this and to have this concern and to notify people, someone she did not know but had read of this. And but I said, of course, God has his soul with him, and Dennis is progressing in eternity right now. A priest so tormented with feeling no way out but suicide is not in a right state of mind. Who knows if persons or persons were in essence killing him? I've been in many parishes now. Even in that diocese, I had out of one and wanted to find it. I always like to go to Mass, especially when the ecstasy started. If it would bother, I'd be asked to go on or shoved out, shunned out. So, and when I moved, I had to find a parish, an island parish. That priest was uncomfortable, and then I tried on the mainland, and my ecstasy was a real problem for people. And here, had a priest here say, "Oh, you can't come here." One did say, "Oh, yes, yes," but then started becoming upset. So we know that story of how that happened. And so as a result, though, I've been blessed with many, many parishes of getting to know how they are and how people can be, human nature as it is. And I've been in my ex-husband, he would get different jobs and we would move. And so we had various churches, we Protestant churches. So I know human nature. I know how it can be in churches. And yes, we're Christians, but we are sinners. So and in the Catholic Church, with the priest, often it's us people who put them on pedestals, but they don't marry, and they have often, with priest shortage even, there's not that many vocations to priesthood. So priests have a lot laid on them at an early age, a lot of responsibility. And bishops are the ones that approve which ones go to the seminary. And that's a major responsibility because we don't always know or see things, or people can change or pressures can affect them. So we have no idea what was going on with this young priest other than the archbishop said, based on what he had been told and shown, that there had been correspondence that showed that this priest was in an extreme mental health crisis. So why and what the crisis was about, we don't know, but there's many options for it. We can easily see there's many possibilities of too much pressure from outside or from the parishioners or people. He was young, 33 years old, was ordained. I took time yesterday afternoon reading online about him, what little I could find, because he hadn't been a priest that long. But I found even an article he'd written a couple years ago of how he loved to go out into nature because he could, to relax and get refreshment, but also he could really sense God and God's wondrous creation in nature, and then would pray and thank God for all this wonder of God's beautiful creation and his power and might, and showing himself through the beauty of the world around us and how refreshing that could be to him. And then in his statement when he was being ordained, they had interviewed each of the 5 in his group that were ordained in 2017 in Cedar Rapids. And I read what he wrote and what the others wrote. And his was distinctive as a very sensitive soul. And he has a parents and a sister. And he became increasingly thinking of priesthood in college. Someone had mentioned it to him. Had he considered that, thought that he should, and he discounted. He went on to college, but during college, then it came back up to him, with himself. So he ended up going to seminary, maybe his junior year in college or around that time, and was even trained, finished seminary, and then was trained further courses in the Pontifical University in Rome. So well educated, and had that wonderful experience in Italy, in Rome, living there and studying there. And he also, though, mentioned his grandmother was very influential in his life. His grandmother had suffered a debilitating illness for 30 years, and that he was very close to her and very taken by how she suffered, the depth that she suffered, but also that she offered it to God. That really influenced him. And I could tell from other things he said in that interview, when he was ordained, or just prior to, that he had suffering himself, knew suffering himself. And that was one big thing that he looked forward to as a priest, and a reason he wanted to be a priest. One of the reasons, a large reason, was he wanted to be able to counsel people, to pray with them, and to help lift their sufferings from them, to help them find means to deal with suffering, and to help lift and ease their burdens through Christ, through church, through Christianity, and through prayer. So very sensitive, and that was a main focus. And others had different focus. And he had also considered being a Jesuit, being in a religious order, but decided no, he wanted to do in a diocese, be a parish priest, because he would have more opportunity to counsel with people with their sufferings and their upsets in life, and to help lift that burden that life can bring of suffering. So he had that sensitivity to him, and so we don't know, but I just know from being in parishes myself and with young priests at times that older people can be very, think, well, they're green behind their ears or whatever. Others can, and maybe not heed that much. You can, before the ecstasies, when I was aware of what's going on in Mass in a more outer, external way, people not really paying attention, people coming just for the Eucharist and leaving right after, people maybe on the way out don't even remember what the sermon was about. The sermon that a priest like him would take seriously and probably worked hard on. And when they're new and all, their sermons are not as polished, usually, as the more experienced priests, or the priests that pull them out of the file and recycle them every 3 years or every 5 years, depending on how long they're in a parish, or even repeat. The first priest I had would repeat, even within the first year, he would repeat same sermon or same theme. And just like I repeat my message of let's not get ensnared in the externals of the temporal. Keep moving spiritually forward. Keep growing. So, I repeat that myself. So, and he was older, but I'm far older than that priest was, and I know I have memory issues. Sometimes I wonder if I repeat within the same video. So we don't know. And then, so he could have noticed that, been sensitive to people not paying attention or feeling that he wasn't having impact on people. Or maybe, as people can be, he had burned himself out because of people wanting, especially an empathic, highly empathic priest. Oh, come to my child's this or that, or come to dinner, Father, or, and then, if they can't, people can take offense or want to help and help. And so counsel and counsel. And when persons really need to be moved on to a clinical psychologist for their problems, but the priest maybe feels like, I really want to help this person, but can take on those crosses themselves and not be experienced enough to be able to set boundaries and block, just as I have, and this person who wrote to me found the ugliness and the evils that are in those we love and in the church itself. Maybe he'd encountered, his eyes had been open to other things within the diocese going on that are kept hush-hush from the people, but priests are privy to. And it can be crushing and upsetting. Or perhaps he within himself was having a vocation crisis and thinking, this really is not where I was called. And then how can I get out of it? Families of a priest are always very proud of that. And others around them. They even put the family, the parents, and the siblings of a priest up on a pedestal in a special place of awe and respect. It's a big hoo-hoo thing. If someone in your family is a priest, that can be a very big point of pride. And others can even sort of resent it, envy. Oh, they don't say it. But others then will put even a seminarian up on a pedestal and make them, on that pedestal. Then if they feel guilty, like, because they know themselves, they know they have sins, they know that they're not perfect, and maybe things that they don't want anyone to really know about. But yet they've been placed on such a pedestal that they feel there's no way out of it, saving face at all. Too hard to say, I need to take a respite, or I need to discern further. I need a sabbatical, or I need out. This isn't right for me. Or I've mentioned the one assignment priest that I had who knowingly went in. This isn't this was a totally different thing, but it can happen. He had issues, and being a priest was going to be a cover for him to save face with his parents. He was the only son of with two sisters, this other priest. And he knew, and he wanted to be a priest because he would have esteem and a position and status, yet also he could get away with his great sickness and weakness that he had, porn addiction and attraction to boys ages 10 to 13 or 14, in that range, or even 15. But he had one that he started early and was particularly attached to in a bad way. So um, he didn't want out. He was working it. He had people fooled until God put me on that assignment, but had me fooled until I was fully invested and had moved into that area. And then as soon as I was secured there, boom, God showed me. And oh my, devastating. But eventually I had I worked with him and had to then eventually turn it over. And he needed to be removed. That is not this, I'm not saying, this is not this priest thing. But it's just the various things that can go on. But I knew another priest who was marvelous, but a woman, an older woman who had been married 3 times. She was a doctor, medical doctor, and she took a fancy to him. And sometimes women will go after priests, just as it's sort of a psychological issue with them, to want to see if they can take the forbidden fruit and get them. And that woman worked on him and worked on this other priest, and he fell in love. She was 13 years older, had been married 3 times, too old to have children, and he would never have his own children, but he wanted out of the priesthood. He'd been given his first parish that was his alone in this little outpost country parish that was more isolated and small, and he was very talented. I had noticed him in a whole crowd and had asked this assistant priest at this first parish, "Who is that young man over there?" He wasn't wearing any distinctive clothing. "Oh, that's our seminarian." "How did you notice him out of these 300 people?" It was an ice cream social. And we were standing off, and I was standing up sort of high, could see all through this big crowd. And this young man was as if God had had a sunbeam on him. I knew that something special about this soul, either super, super wonderful or something. But, oh, that's our seminarian. First one we've had in this parish in years. And I got to know him, and we became good friends. I have all his letters. We corresponded in his last couple of years of seminary. And but then he fell to that, and he had emailed me and had wanted me to basically give me his blessing. And also the bishop had talked to me about it. Well, found out that I knew him well, and asked me to pray and to do whatever I could, talk to him, anything, to get him to reconsider this seriously. And he's the one that told me her age and the situation. And even if you were going to fall in love as a priest, it wasn't really outwardly anyway, temporally, the best circumstances. I don't know. I think they're still married, though. Maybe it was true love or right for him. But I did try. I also had a dream vision of this woman with him, and how carnal it was, that the devil had used her in this way. And I came out and told him how I had seen him out of all these people. I'd never told him that before, how I had noticed him. I didn't want him to be, I didn't want to do that, lay that on him. But I said, you have such potential for the church. And I know, because I was in the battle, I was in the trenches by then. I said, I know it's hard. What you've seen, what you know that you're to keep quiet about or whatever, and to stay focused on the spiritual. And in this small little parish alone, because he says he was lonely and depressed. And yes, the devil worked on him with that. But I pray he's happy now. I later wrote and apologized, but it crushed him when I said, please do not do this, and I did write and shared the vision I had, and also what I had seen of his future and how rich it was and how the church needed him, someone like him. But I then wrote and said, but if I trust you, if you really can't, and you couldn't take any more, obviously, we don't want to bring people to the brink of pressure and what they ultimately decide for themselves. But later on in life, those of us who know, even with degrees that I would have gotten other than an education that I wanted, but I fit in with what my husband wanted for our family, and it made sense and it was fine. But it wasn't my best spot. I would have had other things I would have done. Even the clinical psychology was a shoo-in for me. I didn't realize back then. But I was accepted to law school. That would have been good. But my husband absolutely did not want that. I would be in a different groove, even as far as our time off and things. And so, and plus, I didn't realize just how controlling he had become increasingly with me. But you look back and you think so much time that I had. Looking back, you think, I'm sure at times, what he might have done, or later on in the next life, what he might have accomplished with souls. But he had reached his breaking point, and I knew it. I wrote and apologized, but I didn't hear it back. I had hurt him. And that, that's the consequence you take when you speak out like that. And I shared truth of what I was shown of him and of the situation, and even to wait if he could take longer from my own experience of falling in love and making major decisions too soon. A haste can make waste, but I think it's working out. I don't know. I haven't researched for a while, but I think that probably still married, and he did evidently found happiness that he needed. So, but he had his family were supportive of him. They knew that he had gotten down and was lonely there and having these second thoughts and he was a very good looking young man. And I had even wondered, getting to know him, what he was really giving him his all to the church and to celibacy. Because he was very marriageable, in other words, great personality and everything. So very kind, and would be a wonderful husband, and he would be a wonderful father. I don't think she had children, but I don't know. Anyway, just these examples of what we can, as parishioners, not understand, and also all the pressures we can put on someone. Or even if we find something we don't like about them and criticize and do our little bit of shunning bit with, or complain to the bishop or want him to be moved on or things like that. We can be very cruel. But we can also then, put them on pedestals that lays a lot of guilt and pressure on them in that way. So whatever it was, though, this young man took his life, this young priest, and I wrote back, and when I read what she wrote, back to that, about people being angry and hurting because of what he did, and really laid it all on him. And that she just hoped that in the least that God would open the doors to purgatory for him. And that's why I wrote what I did. And then I went further with it because, from my death experience, I wasn't in a good temporal place. I wasn't without sin when I died in 1987 on the night of July 28th in a hospital recovery room, and was gone quite a while. And God had me in a beautiful place and was going to take me on with him. There was no showing of hell or anything of the sort. And it wasn't but 8 or 9 months later, the next Easter, would have been 1988. Early in the morning, I was awakened with what I didn't know the term for it, but it was a waking vision and locution. And God showed me the situation I'd been in, that I had been beating myself up over, and also questioning, why was it I was in such a beautiful place when I was dead? So much love and joy and glory, 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 instead of hell, or even, the fires, or even in a dark place, even for what I'd been doing and had done. And God was telling me on that Easter morning, showed me that situation and said, you were a victim. And in this state, I kept saying, no, I was part of it, though. I should have known better. I should have known. I shouldn't have. I was weak. And God said, yes, you were weak, but you were put upon. You were deceived. You were duped. This person was the devil using you, and made you a victim and tricked you. And God was wanting nothing of me bearing this burden that I kept going on with, of how it was my fault, and the remorse, and also the questioning. How could I possibly have been in a good place? It went against with what I thought I should have been. And then I realized God is mercy and love. How understanding is God? He is so understanding. He understood. He knew exactly the evil of this other person and how he had snared me, trapped me, entrapped me. And then when I came out of this, and I just was basking in the glory of it all, that God would choose Easter morning for my resurrection from that, and to assure me that I was totally forgiven and that God hadn't blamed me to begin with. I more blamed myself. I took it upon me to be God and to be the vindictive blamer that I somehow thought God was. And God justifiably is in other situations. And I don't know how he would have been had I not been repeating and bleeding out. But no, I had also, and should have known better and should have been stronger. And so, maybe God appreciated that of me and knew how God knew how I felt and how awful I felt. But this attitude that making other people confused, yes, that's true, is this priest suicide, and hurt, yes, hurting, hopefully for him, but not hurt that he did something that was embarrassing to us as a church or whatever, or wrong in that way, and angry. Well, we should be angry at ourselves, but I didn't get the idea of that from what was written here. And from that statement, I pray at the very least, God open purgatory for this priest's suffering soul. Yes, she has great compassion for him, but I think, that's, and I know this person is also has married someone who is very external temporal type. And it's sort of a trend in the church um, for this movement of younger people, even um, thinking, that if it's not a Latin Mass, it's not as good. And, a priest in a cassock is better than a priest just in a collar. It's getting to be even more external of image and external temporal things that we are going by, thinking that this is better, or that priest is maybe holier than because of that, or any indication of being more as it used to be because we think that was better and that the church was better then. But no, it has to do with the spiritual. It's in us how the church is. We're the body. Christ is the head and he's perfect. We're the variables. We people, we body of Christ. And how we are, and if we're progressing spiritually, if we're growing in love and understanding and getting to know God. So I knew that of God in various life experiences, including my death experience, that God would totally understand his priest, who all these other things he did and his desires in the article he wrote. And he was leading a pilgrimage coming up with another priest. He was in a mental health crisis. And I think we need to be praying for whoever knew, maybe one or more people, knew from his correspondence around that time period that he was in an obvious mental health crisis. Why did they not do something radical? Insist on staying in the rectory with him, contacting the bishop, and creating a scene. Do not let this go. This is a danger point. Contacting his parents. Please come be with him. He's writing things that are showing he's in a severe mental health crisis. Calling the authorities if they must, but we have this reticence. There's this bubble around a priest that we don't cross into, not to fraternally correct when they need it, and deserve that respect to be fraternally corrected because we care about them, because they're a person first. They're a soul like us, and a priest happens to be their vocation. And we maybe elevate that vocation way too high, beyond common sense and human understanding of need and of caring, and think that they can handle everything when they're people, they're persons, and the weight can crush down, and in their position of being on this pedestal that people have created for them, they dare not want to show it. But this was even leaking out in what he was writing. And maybe someone did say, I want to stay here with you. Or let me call your parents. Or let me get help. And the priest, oh, no, no. The priest needs to keep his place because he doesn't want to disappoint people. This one of all priests, he was so sensitive and caring and didn't want other people to have burdens. He would suffer it for them. He wanted to help lift their burdens. And it crushed him. All that crushed him. It became too much. So we have to override sometimes what another person says or says, I'm okay. If we know from something that it isn't okay, even if we look the fool and we are the fool and are wrong, better to be wrong than to have a situation like this. And it can be a priest or anyone. And when we're wrong, we can lose their friendship. We could be shunned out of the parish if word spread that we had done this thing and embarrassed the priest or something. Other people could attack because of that, People get funny. It's a different kind of a situation in a parish than in a Protestant church. It's a whole different system. And some of it's good and some of it's not. So we need to openness. I'm so pleased that this archbishop, of course, he wanted to stop rumors that would start by stating the truth. And then he gave his message in with his, if you know of anyone or this or that, take steps to stop it or to get help and get help for yourself. People were writing, why didn't he get help for himself? He couldn't. He was too disturbed, too distressed, too in despair, and or he couldn't be that open as a priest. Who would want to come and share with someone who was having a breakdown or something? Everything was falling apart in his whatever he wanted in his life and his vocation and in the position people place priests. Many are more compassionate than a young priest would think, but others won't be. Others will be like this, thinking, oh, I hope at least God will let him into purgatory for the horrible thing he did. Not understanding. Well, she's young. My friend is young. And as I said, it's married someone who's very, very externally temporal into that and more rigid, very rigid. And she's sort of that. And then as the day progressed, though, she wrote other things, though, today. Well, I had written back about that and about how people can be and how, of course, God is with that priest. And went into my bit about St. Catherine of Genoa, talking to us about how God is pure love. She gained that in her ecstasies. And how we are to keep striving in our lives to learn and practice and become as much pure love and pray for that gift. And because God wants to be one with us. He wants us to be united in him and become one in his pure love. As much as we can in this life, and we will keep progressing in that in the next. And this priest sounds like he was extremely loving person. Extremely loving, but maybe didn't have the boundaries or the experience yet to be able to realize that he can't take all that on. That like with me and this other person, we've got ill. It made us ill, all that we saw and all that we were on assignment or work for God in. It's can be too much, can get to be a lot. And I, by the grace of God, am hanging in. I had a spiritual director. I could be very open with my spiritual father and also Father Vincent. And I've been catharting it out on internet here. Further getting it out of me. Document dump of all these things. Because it's healing. It's healing. As I said, the truth shall set us free. And we can't be so concerned about how it's going to look, because the church is more exceptional made when truth is in there. And we're not putting the church up on some ideal pedestal. That's where I went wrong. Because then it's too shocking when we realize the church is made of people, body of Christ, and we're sinners. So obviously it's not going to be ideal and perfect. That's what threw my son off. And he still can't accept it. Crushed him. And he's turned away from God also in any church. So anyway, I wrote of these things and said Jesus taught much about all these things, and it's written in Gospels. John, the apostle of love, wrote about love as well, and that saints live it. Saints live this love of others, love of understanding, love as God loves, with great compassion. Doesn't mean that we still don't know truth. We know right from wrong. But we have developed an understanding and an empathy and a knowledge of why we sin, and what happens if someone is having a mental health crisis. They're not in their right mind. God knows that. If we don't, we start putting ourselves in the place of God, or we limit God to being like us, not understanding, not empathic, and an autocrat who condemns a priest who's given himself so lovingly to others, or is in some other kind of a cataclysmic crunch, that the only way out was to kill himself. He couldn't bear the humiliation or the gossip or whatever it was going to be if he left priesthood, if that was part of the issue, or face that he was falling apart, that he was having a breakdown of some sort. If he was aware of that level, that even would become too much. What would happen to this priesthood that he loved? See, any number of these possibilities. I don't know what they are. We don't know, and we don't need to know. We can just know that all of them could be scenarios for any priest. Or a priest, I know of another one who fell in love and kept for like 8 years or 9 years. The woman became pregnant, kept this double life going, and the parishioners didn't know. He set her up in a home in a city nearby, but half hour or 40 minutes away. On his days off, he would go there. He had an 8-year-old child and a home, yet he was in the rectory these other times. And finally, one Sunday, he admitted the truth in all of his masses and left the priesthood. Had that kind of courage. And of course, it was scandalous, it was shocking, and blah, blah, blah. And at that time, the church kept it all very hush-hush. The diocese did and everything, the bishop and all. It was actually my young seminarian at the time friend who told me, though I don't mean to scandalize you, but this has happened. It was in a neighboring town. And he says, I just don't want you to find out, because he says, I know you have all this idealism, it would just crush you. And it would have, and that just stunned me too. And I'm sure at the time I had castigatory kinds of thoughts about that priest. How could he, and all. Because it's so easy for us to be condemnatory and to hold such a high ideal until the devil gets a hold of us and gives us a whirl and has us crash and burn. So then we know what it's like. But some things some people can't handle. So I wrote this in a way after I wrote about how it's us people, what we do also that affects priests. And our ideal that we hold them to, whereas we don't to ourselves, of course. In a way, this priest is a martyr of the church. How many others have been brought to the brink by us, in essence, by the situation? And by our keeping the priesthood in such a lofty position that no one dare even slip a little bit or trip, and we're all over it, Can't, oh, terrible, terrible, We all bear responsibility, all who have become temporalites and have cast heavy temporal burdens without grasping the numinous of God's pure love, nor grasp that we are to be one in living and being as his pure love here and now, heaven on earth. We are to utilize the gifts of the Holy Spirit given. Understanding is one, and wisdom, how we treat even a priest, and what we expect. And to remember that they're people, that they are persons with issues and with a soul, especially young ones, without the experience, and having to deal with so much responsibility at a young age. And I think he was the only pastor in this parish in Cedar Rapids, probably a big parish. So yeah, thank you. I said thank you for sending this great message and reminder. God bless this young priest forever. Well, she wrote back this morning. I respectfully disagree that he is a martyr in any way, though I do pray for the mercy that only God can give, for he is the only one that can extend the mercy we all desire, and that he desires to give us if we ask. Then she repeats, though, I pray that at the very least he's in purgatory, awaiting the fullness of Christ's pure love. Because I've written about God as pure love. So anyway, you're welcome for sharing, she said. Then she went into some other prayer needs she needs for her dad, who was one person who was always good to me. But other people, look, he was not well off, had lived a life of all kinds of trials, addictions and different things. I think he was in jail in town for a while for some public alcoholism or things like that, and turned himself around. I always called him Saint Mark. His name was Mark. I saw the holiness in this man, and he had already had conversions and a great father, great dad. He so appreciated what I did with his daughter when she was young, when his wife couldn't at that point in time. She was having her issues and had a little 4 and 2-year-old or 3 and 1-year-old. And there was my friend is an 8 and 9-year-old after school and 10-year-old helping, watching her brother and sister while her mother slept. And I would go, when I found out, I would go sometimes after school and do her tutoring there, sometimes take her to my house. And sewed her saint outfit when she was in 5th grade, and did baking and different things with her, had her do a gingerbread house, things like that I knew her mother couldn't do. And I prayed, though, because I knew her mother would feel sort of put out, here's this other woman. But her mother, I admire her for handling it at the time as well. And then it got to the time that it was too much, so I backed away. But the mother got through her issues and got into deeper conversion through her daughter, her little girl, her devotion and her faith. She's a little saint then, and she is now, but she's getting too into this temporal stuff. She put herself through college. It took her a year. She's the first one, and I think still the only one in her family to be a college grad, and she got her master's, and she's a counselor herself. But into this limiting of God in a way, and going with the doctrines or the old teachings Anyone who kills himself is out of luck, And no, we know now. We know better. And those who have died, like me, know that God is very understanding and forgiving, and especially those who are not in a right state of mind. They can't be held accountable to the same degree at all. And in fact, who knows the circumstances? We need to be praying for whoever knew that he was in this crisis through his writing and correspondence to them and didn't get bold and pushy. And it's better to risk friendship and to risk being humiliated for being wrong than to be in despair now, whoever it was or many who did nothing to get him immediate help or to insist on being there. What was he going to do? Physically drag them out of the rectory if they said, we're staying here all night? Or I'm staying here all night with you because I'm concerned. I'm calling your family. I'm calling the bishop. I'm doing whatever. I'm calling the police if I have to. Because they could come and do a check. And I'm sorry if this is going to embarrass you. I won't tell anyone. But that didn't happen, see? So, and who knows, there'd be a time I wouldn't have. But I don't know. I get in trouble for the way I am, and I've been wrong before too, and apologized, and I've lost friends for being bold. But I've not regretted, other than in my own life, that I wasn't stronger in my own life. So in certain situations, particularly like in my marriage. And so anyway, that's all this other are a situation in her life then that comes up that she needed, that is based on sort of this same attitude of a little bit condemning. And I was critical of a friend and assumed that the friend was not being chaste before marriage. Doesn't know for sure, the friend won't talk, but the friend cut off. But see that, and then I talked it through with her in lots of texting. And through all that, I was reminded of the time that John of the Cross came, and I'd asked him the night before some questions because my spiritual I was being obnoxious. And I was asking all these questions, more intellectual type, and of my spiritual and he says, of John of the Cross and different things, and pointing out little discrepancies that I'd seen in my reading. And he says, you seem to be the one with all the questions and noticing all these little things, little discrepancies. He says, you ask John of the Cross. You ask him, since you seem to know or want to know. And I could tell by the tone of my spiritual voice, he was put out with me. And he rarely was, but he was, and rightly so. And that night I did ask John of the Cross. The next morning, I'm laying in this bed and waking up, and I hear this whirring sound up here, coming into the room and down. And then this voice speaks. It's John of the Cross. I'm thrilled. It's John of the Cross. He did not materialize in a person. He didn't need to. I knew it was him. I heard that whirring noise, which I recognized and realized later. It takes them energy and effort to come to bring us a message in a spoken voice and in an image form. It's a bother. It's effort. And all he said to me was, you are self-righteous. And then he left. Went right back out from whence he came. Of course, I was just ecstatic, thrilled that John of the Cross said anything to me. And I knew immediately he was so right. I was self-righteous, very self-righteous. I was so excited I couldn't wait until it was a decent time of the morning I could call the spiritual da and tell him what John of the Cross said and apologize to my spiritual father for being self-righteous. And then I also realized with the effort it took from hearing all that whirring sound slower and slower, he had to calibrate down to my energy level so that I could hear a voice from him. Because they thought flash. I knew that from my death experience already, that you thought flash when you're on the other side. It's effortless. But for us, it's we have to be in this body to be able to speak. It's a different energy. It's a different way, totally different essence. And they have to come to us in an image, in a vision, and in a voice. They have to alter. And it's effort and energy, and they lovingly do it. But it's not fun. It's no more fun than when I had to go back into my lifeless body from being in this glory, and I had to go back into all this pain and effort and everything we do. We don't realize what effort. And so I just made this prayer to God and to anyone out there, all these souls on the other side who love me and help me. I said, I am so sorry. I promise to try harder, to be more in tune to the subtlety and to the nuances and to hearing and sensing what you're telling me and showing me without you having to come to me in some kind of an image, corporeal form, or in a voice that I literally hear. And since then, I have had very few. Sometimes dreams, that's easier for them because we're also not really in our temporal state as much in our dreams. We're in a state of image, of our images of our mind. It's easier for them to give messages through dreams. And so I've not had many at all of anything of that sense. And yes, I'm sure I've missed out or it's taken me longer to get points. But I feel better about it because the onus is on us to sensitize and to grow and to do the work of reading so that we learn more that way too of what these great souls wrote when they were on earth, but were inspired because they were as one with God at times on earth, or what they were told in ecstasies on earth. So do our reading. Yes, it takes time and effort, and we have to tune out other things to do that. But so I did a lot of writing with this young woman because I have been there, and I realized, I wrote to her, I said, it's so good that you have contacted me because I don't hear from her often at all, which is fine because she's in her married life, I'm in mine, and there's no need. And she's back there and has her parish life and her priest and her confession to go, she can talk to a priest and done, it's fine. And is good even this way. But I said, I needed what you're bringing up because I said, I have become very critical and going back over past things and being critical and complaining, even though I'm getting it out and trying to learn something positive from it all. I said, I have been once more self-righteous. And she brought up something that she's having a problem with having friends, and one that she had gotten too condemnatory with, which isn't our business of people's sex life. She admitted then that she had no business, that the person hadn't brought it up. She just sensed that the person was having sex before marriage, and she's gotten into this very rigid, and yes, it is a sin, But I said we have to take people where they are, and not everyone has that strong will. That's a tough one, especially with society. It's so prevalent now. Premarital sex, especially if you're engaged or something, the temptation becomes greater. And I said there, that increasingly our saying things to people, it's how we say it, but best not to say most things. Instead, to just live our lives. And I brought up being a guest. Be a guest in our friendships. Be as a guest. Respectful, love as God loves, and ask God first, how do you want me to handle this? And otherwise pray for the person. And especially if you don't know, even if you're just assuming or thinking. But the friend cut her off. I said, you'll have other friends. He said, we just got to keep trying. And I said, that's with me, with what I'm doing. I didn't mention my videos here, but I've been critical and self-righteous sounding and being, not just sounding. And it has to stop. And I cannot be triggered anymore. I have to reject the sin of being triggered and of going back. There's, like I realized today, there's too much in the here and now for me to be sharing with someone else if they need and want, and she did. And then thinking of her father, who was always so good to me and so appreciated, and then helped me so much when I needed to move, or he would go out mushroom hunting and bring back these beautiful morel mushrooms and give them to me. He just a lovely, holy man, and his wife now has had these deep conversions now for many years. She has, and so this is how we learn and grow, and how God was reminding me. Well, I've got somebody contacting, but so this is another long video, but pray for this priest, his soul, and pray for those who aren't understanding and those who feel guilty. And we all, though, I think we all bear. Well, she later wrote and said, how she disagrees totally that he's a martyr. I mean that in the sense that he could represent any number of priests who are in essence killed by us parishioners and our expectations of them, and are putting them in a position of such high pedestal that they dare not bleed, that they dare not seem to be less than what we have put them up there to be. And as a result, that pressure can cause them to crack or cause them to sneak and do things behind. And then, God forbid, if any should take their life, the only anger we should have is at ourselves as to what part we had in perhaps creating the pressurized situation, or not being understanding enough, or making the priesthood such a position of holiness and exclusivity that no one dare have the courage to say, I think I need a sabbatical. I think I need a time to discern over again. Maybe this isn't what I'm to be doing. And to have the courage and the support to do that. Or like my friend, I'm in love. I want to marry. Priesthood is not for me. I've become depressed. And yes, even if the devil maybe has used someone to do that, and not even the best situation, but maybe it was. Maybe the woman was married 3 times and they were all wrong. Maybe this was the right one for her. We can't judge. We do We do it, but we should not. It only causes trouble, ultimately for ourselves, because it's self-righteous. And that's a huge sin. Maybe God will be kind enough to at least open the gates of purgatory for me or for my friend, for what we do and say in the judgment, maybe for what she said to her friend that lost her friend. Maybe it'll patch back up. She's going to try. I mentioned apologizing. Well, I'm not going to apologize. I spoke the truth. I said, but you can always apologize for the way you spoke it. And then when she admitted that her friend hadn't even brought up her own sex life, I said, well, apologize for broaching into a private topic that was not yours to break into. And she admitted, she's a holy young woman. This is what too much temporal and rigidity can do to us. Attachment to the externals of these rigid thoughts and external teachings or whatever that humans have made up in time periods that change. And we recognize our puritanical. We know the Puritan time period where the Puritans would, my son came home in 6th grade, he just had some history, and he says, Mom, he said, we just studied about the Puritans. He says, if you lived back in that time, they would have burned you or drowned you, wouldn't they? I said, yep, they would have. I would have been if I lived then. He recognized that. Yes, it's we times change. They don't do that to mystics anymore. They don't burn them at the stakes, but they still do other stuff that, maybe part of my sharing is going to help people rethink that a little bit too. And, while a mystic can come up with good results and understand that they learned through it, but still would be okay if we learned those same lessons without other people being the ones causing it. Let's let God teach us. And let God tell this young woman, if she doesn't already know. I said, most people know it's a sin, who go to church at least know, to have premarital sex. But that doesn't mean that most of us have the strong will to not. I certainly didn't have that kind of willpower. And I had a fiance who kept working on me, and the devil knew my weak point of wanting to so much be like everyone else. So, and everyone else, that was in the sexual revolution time period, the early 70s. And and I've regretted that, but I knew I know now I didn't have the strength of will, and I doubt if I still would. I just don't think I do, but I knew I didn't want it. I mean, I prayed. I didn't want to sin, but the what does it say? The flesh is weak, even if the mind is strong, or something to that effect. So, anyway. And I had people who knew, and my mother, and gently, tried, but nothing would have changed it. When our bodies and minds and emotions are all afire with lust and with hormones raging and desire and so in love, we'll do what we're going to do. And it would be God alone who I think could reach in and shake us. Even then we ignore. So, but I said it's okay, but then you have to accept the consequences. That people won't like it and you'll be done. That'll be it. So, and you have to weigh, is it worth it? What situations are worth it? To me, life and death is worth it. So, okay, enough. I've gone on and on, probably longer than ever, than the ones I tried last night. God bless His real presence in us, and Happy New Year with the start of Advent.